A wealthy heir poses as an intern within his own company to find a deserving partner among his employees. He navigates office politics and observes interactions with surprising kindness from a project manager, but she discovered his true intention. In the heart of Silicon Valley, amidst a skyline dotted with cranes and gleaming new office buildings, Chris Hamilton stood at the window of his sleek, well-appointed office. The youngest heir to Hamilton Technologies, a pioneering force in the tech industry, he appeared to have it all. However, beneath the surface, Chris was a tangle of discontent and disillusionment. Wealth and privilege had made dating a spectacle of insincerity. Every smile felt rehearsed, every conversation a calculated move. Tonight was particularly grating. Another high society party full of artifice lay ahead, where conversations would circle around net worth and investment opportunities rather than passions or dreams. Chris's reflection in the glass stared back at him, a reminder of the role he was expected to play, the charming billionaire bachelor. But tonight he made a decision that would veer off the scripted path. Instead of his usual tailored suit, he chose a plain t-shirt and jeans. This was the first piece of his new disguise. His plan was simple and audacious: go undercover as an intern at his own company. He wanted to meet someone genuine who knew nothing of his wealth, someone who could love him for his ideas and not his bank account. As he left his penthouse, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders, a step towards something real. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the bustling streets as Chris, now Chris Harper, the intern, walked towards the Hamilton Technologies startup incubator. His heart raced with a mix of nerves and excitement. Today, he was just another hopeful young professional with a forged resume in hand, a detailed backstory concocted by his trusted friend and the company's HR head, who was the sole confidant in this escapade. As Chris pushed through the glass doors of the incubator, the vibrant energy of the place struck him. The open office was a colorful chaos of activity. Young tech enthusiasts buzzed around, their conversations a blend of code, upcoming projects, and the latest tech news. The stark contrast to his usual corporate environment was refreshing and intimidating. He was greeted by Jessica, the HR assistant, who believed him to be a recruit from a modest university with a scholarship background. She handed him a welcome packet and guided him to his new workstation, a stark, small desk amidst a row of eager interns. "Your team lead will be with you shortly. His name's Dave, and he's brilliant but a bit intense. Good luck, Chris." Jessica smiled warmly before disappearing into the crowd. Chris took a deep breath, surveying his surroundings. Desks cluttered with laptops, notepads, and the odd personal touch. A potted plant, a family photo, made the space feel lived in. He logged into his new, significantly less powerful laptop and glanced around to catch snippets of discussions about algorithms and user experience, trying to absorb the fervor and passion that permeated the room. This was it, a new beginning. Chris felt the first genuine smile in weeks spread across his face. He was ready to dive into the world of his own making from a new perspective. Here, he wasn't Chris Hamilton the magnate, he was Chris Harper, the intern, and so his journey began, one keystroke at a time. Chris had barely settled in when a voice cut through the hum of conversations. "Chris Harper. I'm Dave, your team lead for the next few months." The man extending a hand was lean, with sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. His smile was friendly, but there was an underlying intensity that matched his reputation. "Nice to meet you, Dave. I'm excited to be here," Chris replied, his voice carrying a blend of feigned enthusiasm and genuine curiosity. Dave nodded, leading Chris on a quick tour around the bustling workspace. "We're glad to have you. You'll be working on our new mobile payment system project. It's pretty cutting-edge stuff, and we need all the fresh ideas we can get." As they walked, Chris was introduced to a flurry of faces and names he made a mental effort to remember. But one person stood out, Natalie, a project manager with an easy laugh and a keen intelligence that sparkled in her eyes. "Chris, meet Natalie. She'll be your go-to for anything project-related. Natalie, this is Chris, our new intern." Natalie's handshake was firm, her smile genuine. "Welcome aboard, Chris. We're in the middle of a sprint, but I'll make sure to get you up to speed quickly." "Thank you, Natalie. I look forward to contributing," Chris said. His interest piqued not just by her warm demeanor, but also by the subtle authority she wielded among her peers. The rest of the morning was a blur of orientation sessions and setup procedures. Chris found himself drawn into the intricate details of the project, his mind buzzing with technical challenges and potential solutions. Just when Chris was beginning to feel comfortable, a sudden alert sounded throughout the office. The large screens displayed a flashing red message, "System breach detected." Instantly, the room's atmosphere shifted from creative chaos to tense urgency. Dave quickly gathered the team, his voice firm. "We have a security breach. It seems like there's been an unauthorized attempt to access our payment gateway. We need to isolate the breach and assess the damage ASAP. Chris, observe for now. This is critical." Chris nodded, but his heart raced, not just from the adrenaline of the situation, but from the realization that he could actually help. His extensive background in cybersecurity was part of what had made Hamilton Technologies a leader in tech. Yet, revealing his expertise could blow his cover. He watched as the team frantically typed away, tracing the source of the breach. Natalie coordinated the response with a calm efficiency that Chris admired. He noticed a small mistake in the code on one of the screens, an error he could fix in seconds. But he restrained himself, his hands itching to take action. As minutes turned into hours, the team struggled to contain the breach. Chris's internal battle grew. Every instinct as a leader and tech expert screamed for him to step in. Finally, unable to stand the sideline, he subtly nudged one of the junior developers. "Maybe check the access protocols again. Sometimes the error is not where you think it is," he suggested quietly, careful to keep his tone unsure, masking his confidence. The developer hesitated, then nodded and redirected their approach. Within a few minutes, the team had isolated the issue. Relief washed over everyone, though the source of the breach still needed to be found and secured. Natalie shot Chris a grateful look. "Good call on that, Chris. I didn't catch your background in security during orientation. Anything you want to share?" Chris faltered, then smiled wryly. "Just a lucky guess. I've read a lot about it, that's all." Suspicion flickered in Dave's eyes, but he was too preoccupied to question further. As the day ended, the breach was contained, but questions remained. Chris left the office feeling a mix of satisfaction and frustration. He'd helped, but the limitations of his disguise were becoming painfully clear. The following day, as the team regrouped to debrief and bolster their security measures, Natalie invited Chris to join a smaller task force dedicated to the project's recovery. Her trust in his subtle suggestion the day prior had evidently made an impression. "Chrissy, you've got a sharp eye. Want to help us patch things up and ensure this doesn't happen again?" Natalie asked, her tone indicating that she valued his input, albeit cautiously. Chris accepted with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Working closely with Natalie and a select few from the team would not only test his technical skills, but also his ability to maintain the intern persona under close scrutiny. As they dove into the code, Chris found himself genuinely collaborating, contributing ideas that didn't outpace his supposed experience level. He carefully moderated his knowledge, occasionally asking questions he already knew the answers to, maintaining the guise of learning. Natalie's leadership style was both inspiring and enlightening. She encouraged open discussion and shared her own insights freely. fostering a team dynamic that Chris had always envisioned for his company but rarely saw in action. Their sessions often ran late into the evening, with the two of them last to leave the office. During one such late-night session, Natalie shared more about her background. "I started coding in high school. It was more than just solving problems. It was about making things better, you know?" She glanced at Chris, her eyes searching for a similar passion. Chris nodded, sharing a tempered version of his own journey in tech. "I feel the same. It's about impact, making a difference where you can." His response was genuine, resonating with Natalie's ideals. Their conversation drifted from technology to personal aspirations, revealing layers of their characters. Chris found himself admiring Natalie not just for her intellect, but for her commitment to using technology for social good. However, the growing camaraderie with Natalie was shadowed by increasing suspicion from Dave. His observations of Chris's suggestions during the breach recovery had piqued his curiosity, and his discreet checks into Chris's background began to raise more questions than answers. Dave's probing became more pointed during team meetings, his questions to Chris subtly challenging, pushing for slips or inconsistencies in his tech knowledge. Chris navigated these with careful ambiguity, but it was becoming a mental chess game that drained him. Outside of these confrontations, Chris strategized with his HR confidant, refining his backstory and preparing for potential scenarios where his cover might be blown. "Keep it vague, but plausible. You're a quick study. Remember, that's your story," she advised during one of their quiet meetings in a secluded corner of the cafeteria. Meanwhile, Chris also focused on building relationships with other team members to solidify his intern persona. He volunteered for mundane tasks, shared lunches, and participated in after-work hangouts, embedding himself into the fabric of the team's culture. During one coding session, while implementing a new security feature, Chris accidentally let slip a technical term that was beyond his supposed experience. The room went quiet, all eyes briefly on him. Flustered, he laughed it off as something he read in a tech blog once, and the moment passed, but not without increasing Dave's suspicions. The chapter ends as Chris, walking home, reflects on the precarious balance he's maintaining. Each day brought him closer to the team, yet each day also edged him closer to exposure. The thrill of the undercover role was tinged with the constant risk of discovery, making each success bittersweet. As the project deadline approached, the nights grew longer and the coffee stronger. One particular evening, as the office quieted down and the glow of computer screens illuminated intent faces, Natalie and Chris found themselves alone, passing through lines of code and discussing potential improvements. The conversation subtly shifted from professional to personal. Natalie leaned back in her chair, rubbing tired eyes. "You know, Chris, I've always wondered what drives people to tech. For me, it's about reaching people in ways that weren't possible before. What about you? What's your real drive behind all this?" Chris paused, considering how much truth to share. "I guess I'm looking for impact, too," he began slowly. "I want to make sure that what I do helps people, not just makes money. Sometimes I wonder if that's even possible in this industry." Natalie nodded thoughtfully. "It's a tough balance, but I believe it's doable. You seem to have a good head on your shoulders, Chris. I'm glad you're on this team." Their eyes met, a moment of mutual respect and understanding passing between them. Chris felt a pang of guilt for the deception, but was also touched by the sincerity of the connection forming. Just then, an alert on Natalie's computer disrupted the moment. They leaned in, focusing on the new challenge, their teamwork seamless as they navigated through another minor crisis. By the time they resolved the issue, the office was dark, the city lights casting shadows across their tired faces. "Thanks for sticking it out with me," Natalie said as they packed up. "I don't know what I would have done without you tonight." Chris smiled, feeling both thrilled and conflicted. "Any time, Natalie. It's what teammates do, right?" As they left the building together, the air between them was comfortable yet charged with an unspoken acknowledgement of their growing bond. The next morning brought no relief as a critical system failure loomed just hours before the project presentation. The team rallied, with Chris and Natalie at the helm, troubleshooting under immense pressure. As they worked, Chris's expertise became increasingly difficult to conceal. He found himself making suggestions that only someone with extensive experience could make. Natalie, focused and driven, didn't question his knowledge at the moment, relying on his input more than ever. The crisis reached a peak when an overlooked vulnerability threatened to derail the entire project. With no other choice, Chris stepped up, directing the team with an authority that surpassed his supposed intern status. The problem was averted just in time, but his actions did not go unnoticed. As the team celebrated, Dave pulled him aside, his expression serious. "Chris, how did an intern like you handle that? Who are you really?" he demanded quietly. Chris's heart sank. He had been so focused on solving the problem that he had let his guard down. He needed to think quickly. "Look, Dave, I've been studying this stuff for a long time, even before I joined here. Maybe I got a little carried away today, but I'm just trying to help." Dave stared at him, skeptical but momentarily placated by the chaos of the celebration. "We'll talk about this later," he said, leaving Chris to join the others. The day ended with the project saved and the team's morale high, but Chris knew his position was more precarious than ever. He left the office with a heavy heart, aware that his dual life could unravel at any moment. As the excitement of the day's success waned, Chris found himself alone in his small apartment, reflecting on the events. The thrill of the technical victory was overshadowed by the looming threat of exposure. His venture into the unknown territory of genuine connection had become a tightrope walk over a chasm of potential disaster. He replayed the conversation with Dave, analyzing every word, every expression. It was clear that his cover might not hold much longer. The question now was not if, but when Dave would uncover the truth and what the fallout would be. Not just for him, but for the unsuspecting team members like Natalie who had come to trust him. The next morning, Chris returned to the office with a resolve to maintain his guise a little longer, hoping to find the right moment to come clean on his own terms. But as he walked through the doors, he was greeted not just by the buzz of usual office activity, but by an unexpected visitor, his father, Jonathan Hamilton, the CEO of Hamilton Technologies. Chris felt his stomach drop. His father rarely visited this branch of the company, and never without prior notice. Today, of all days, was not the time he wanted to deal with the complexities of family and business entanglements. "Chris, a word, please." Jonathan's voice was calm, but there was a sharpness to it that suggested he was aware something was amiss. They stepped into a quiet conference room. Before Chris could formulate an explanation, his father held up his hand. "I know," he said simply. "I know you're here under cover. I've known for a while." Chris was stunned. "You knew? How?" Jonathan gave a wry smile. "You think you can fool your old man? I've been keeping an eye on your progress, and I must say I'm impressed and concerned. Why didn't you tell me?" The conversation that followed was intense and emotional. Chris shared his reasons, his desire to connect with the workforce and find authenticity in his personal and professional life. Jonathan listened, his expression a mixture of frustration and understanding. As they emerged from the room, Chris felt a weight lifted off his shoulders, but his relief was short-lived. Across the office, he caught Natalie's eye. She had seen him with his father, the confusion evident on her face. Before he could go to her, his phone vibrated with a message from Dave. "We need to talk now." Chris's heart sank. The day he had dreaded was here, and it was unfolding all at once. He looked from the message on his phone to Natalie's troubled gaze and knew that everything was about to change. The episode ends as Chris steps toward what he anticipates to be a confrontation with Dave, his mind racing with possibilities. Viewers are left wondering, will Chris's true identity be revealed to everyone? How will Natalie react? What consequences will Chris face, both personally and professionally? The office was still abuzz with activity, but the air felt markedly different as Chris approached Dave's corner office. His father's sudden departure had left many questions unanswered among the staff, and Chris could feel the curious glances and hushed whispers trailing him as he moved. Dave was sitting, his expression grim, files spread across his desk, a visual testament to the seriousness he attached to their impending conversation. Chris steeled himself, knocked lightly, and entered. "Dave, you wanted to see me?" Chris asked, keeping his tone neutral despite the anxiety churning inside him. Dave looked up, his eyes hard. "Yes, Chris." "Sit down. We need to clear the air about a few things," he said, motioning to the chair across from him. "I've been going over your background again, and there are gaps that just don't add up. Your sudden expertise yesterday. How did an intern manage that?" Chris sighed, choosing his words carefully. "I understand your concerns, Dave. I've always had a knack for tech. It's been a passion of mine for a long time, even if my formal training doesn't show it." Dave's expression softened slightly, but the suspicion lingered. "I want to believe you, Chris, but something feels off. I can't shake the feeling that there's more to your story. Just be honest with me. Are you here under someone else's orders?" The direct question caught Chris off guard, but he maintained his composure. "No, Dave. I'm here to learn and contribute, just like any other intern. I promise you, there's no ulterior motive." Dave leaned back, studying him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "All right, Chris, I'll take your word for it, for now. But understand this. If I find out you're lying, there will be consequences." Chris nodded, relieved but aware that Dave's trust was conditional and fragile. As he left the office, he felt the weight of the unresolved tension and knew he had to tread carefully. As the days progressed, the dynamic within the team shifted subtly. Although Dave had temporarily set aside his suspicions, the seeds of doubt had been sown, affecting not just his interactions with Chris, but also the overall team morale. Chris noticed small changes, conversations that quieted when he approached, colleagues who were slightly more reserved in their dealings with him, and an unmistakable sense of scrutiny that seemed to follow his every move. Natalie, however, remained a constant ally, although even she seemed a bit more cautious in her interactions. During a team lunch, she leaned in and whispered, "Is everything okay? You seem a bit off these days." Chris smiled wistfully, appreciating her concern. "Just the project stress, I guess," he lied, not wanting to involve her further in his complications. In an effort to bridge the growing gap, Chris doubled down on his contributions to the project. He stayed late, offered help where needed, and tried to be as forthcoming with his knowledge as he could without arousing further suspicion. His efforts were met with mixed reactions. Some appreciated his dedication, while others viewed it as an attempt to cover up a hidden agenda. One evening, as Chris and Natalie reviewed a project document, she mentioned casually, "You know, it's funny how you just appeared out of nowhere and fit right in. It's like you were meant to be here." Her words, meant as a compliment, instead felt like a reminder of his precarious position. Chris forced a laugh. "Yeah, funny how life works sometimes." As they continued to work, the gap between how things appeared and the reality of Chris's situation grew ever wider, making him question how long he could maintain the facade and at what cost. Despite the undercurrents of doubt and the strained atmosphere, Chris found an unexpected ally in Michael, a software engineer who had been somewhat of a loner within the team. One afternoon, while everyone else was at lunch, Michael approached Chris at his desk with a knowing look. "Hey, Chris," Michael started, his voice low, "I've noticed you've been getting the cold shoulder from some of the others. I don't know exactly what your deal is, but I can tell you're here to do more than just intern work. I've seen your kind of drive before." Chris tensed, unsure of how much Michael knew or suspected. "I appreciate that, Michael. I'm just trying to do my best here." Michael nodded, leaning against the desk. "Look, I don't care if you're some undercover billionaire or just an overachiever. You've got good ideas, and this project could use them. If you need someone to run interference or just keep the skeptics off your back, I can help." Grateful for the support but wary of exposing too much, Chris simply thanked him. "I might take you up on that." "Thanks, Michael." From then on, Michael became a subtle guardian within the team, deflecting attention from Chris and occasionally vouching for his contributions. This support gave Chris a bit more room to breathe and focus on the project without constantly looking over his shoulder. As the project neared another critical milestone, the long hours led to more shared moments between Chris and Natalie. Their connection deepened, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared passion for their work. However, Chris's secret loomed large between them, a silent spectre in their growing intimacy. One evening, as they were the last two in the office again, Natalie turned to Chris with a more serious demeanor than usual. "Chris, can I ask you something personal?" Caught off guard, Chris nodded, his heart rate picking up. "Of course." Natalie hesitated, then spoke. "I feel like there's something you're not telling me. We've been working closely for weeks now, and I think I'm starting to like you. Not just as a colleague, but I need to know I can trust you. Is there anything you need to tell me?" The directness of her inquiry hit Chris like a physical blow. He had long feared this moment, knowing that his deception could hurt someone he genuinely cared about. He struggled with his response, torn between his genuine feelings for her and the deception that underpinned their entire interaction. "I do have feelings for you, Natalie," Chris confessed, his voice tinged with regret. "And it's true. There are things about me that you don't know. I want to be honest with you, but it's complicated. I'm not sure how to say this." Natalie's expression was a mix of hope and apprehension. "Whatever it is, Chris, I think it's better if you're just honest with me. We can figure it out together." Chris paused, the weight of his next words holding the potential to either forge a stronger bond or break what they had irreparably. He took a deep breath, preparing to reveal his truth, when suddenly his phone rang, cutting the moment short. It was a call he couldn't ignore, related to the security protocols of their project. With a frustrated and apologetic look, he answered the call, leaving their conversation hanging precariously in the air. The phone call that interrupted Chris and Natalie's moment was from the company's security team, alerting him to another potential vulnerability in their system. This immediate crisis forced both of them back into professional mode, sidelining personal revelations for the moment. As they worked together to address the new threat, Chris admired Natalie's focus and expertise, but his earlier confession hung between them, an unresolved shadow that darkened each interaction. Once they resolved the issue, Natalie brought the conversation back to where they had left off. "Chris, about what you were saying earlier," she began, her tone a mix of curiosity and caution. Chris took a deep breath, knowing he couldn't put off the truth any longer. "Natalie, I'm not just an intern here. I'm actually part of the family that owns Hamilton Technologies. I came here undercover because I wanted to understand the company from the ground up, without any preferential treatment." Natalie's reaction was a mix of surprise and hurt. "So, everything, all our interactions, were they just part of your research?" Chris hastened to explain, his words earnest. "No, Natalie, that's not it at all. What I feel for you, it's real. I started this out of a need to connect authentically, without my background getting in the way. But I didn't expect to meet someone like you. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." The revelation created a rift, with Natalie stepping back to process the implications. I need some time to think about all this, Chris. I can't just ignore that you've been deceiving everyone. Feeling the sting of her words, but understanding her need for space, Chris watched helplessly as she walked away, her conflicted emotions mirroring his own. In the days that followed, the office dynamics shifted noticeably. News of Chris's true identity slowly spread through the team, leading to a mix of reactions. Some felt betrayed, others were indifferent, but many were disappointed by the deceit. Despite this, the project deadlines loomed, forcing the team to maintain a semblance of professionalism. Michael continued to support Chris, helping to mediate some of the tensions within the team. "You just need to give them time," Michael advised. "A day they'll see you're here for the right reasons." Meanwhile, Chris tried to engage with his teammates, apologizing for his deception and explaining his intentions more fully. He participated in team meetings with a new humility, acknowledging the awkwardness of his position, but also his commitment to the project's success. As the team gradually adjusted to the revelation, Chris worked to repair his relationship with Natalie. He sent her a message, requesting a chance to talk, to explain things better. After some hesitation, she agreed, and they met in a quiet corner of the office. "Natalie, I understand if you can't forgive me," Chris started, his tone sincere. "But I hope you can see that my feelings for you were never part of the disguise. I genuinely care about you, and I'm sorry for any pain I've caused." Natalie listened, her expression unreadable. "Chris, I appreciate your apology, and I believe that you didn't intend to hurt anyone, but trust is hard to rebuild. Let's just focus on the project for now and see where things go." Chris nodded, grateful for the chance to at least mend their professional relationship, even if their personal one remained uncertain. With the project deadline fast approaching, Chris focused all his energies on proving his commitment to the team's success, hoping to rebuild some of the trust he had lost. He proposed a series of late-night coding sessions, inviting anyone who was willing to join him to polish and perfect their application. These sessions, often running into the early hours of the morning, became a crucible for the team's resolve. Exhaustion was met with determination, and slowly, the shared goal began to mend some of the fractures within the group. Chris's technical expertise, no longer a secret, was now openly relied upon, and he was careful to acknowledge everyone's contributions, ensuring the team felt valued and integral to the project's success. During one such session, Chris and a few team members managed to solve a particularly thorny problem that had been plaguing the project for weeks. The breakthrough was met with cheers and a renewed sense of camaraderie. Even those who had been skeptical of Chris's intentions couldn't help but acknowledge his dedication. Natalie, witnessing the change in team dynamics, began to soften slightly towards Chris. She appreciated his genuine efforts and started to engage more openly with him again, though she kept their interactions strictly professional. As the project neared completion, Chris organized a team meeting to discuss the final presentation to the board of directors. It was a chance for everyone to voice their concerns and suggestions, and Chris made sure to give each team member the floor to speak. During the meeting, Dave, who had been quietly observant over the past weeks, finally spoke up. "Chris, I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened. I was one of the first to doubt you, and I've been hard on you, but seeing how you've handled yourself in the project, I just want to say, I respect what you're trying to do here." Chris was taken aback by Dave's words, grateful for the acknowledgement. "Thank you, Dave. That means a lot to me. I've always admired your commitment to the team and the project. Let's make sure we finish strong." The team's focus intensified as they prepared for the final presentation. Chris took the lead, but ensured that each member had their moment to shine, presenting parts of the project they had been instrumental in developing. On the day of the presentation, the boardroom was filled with anticipation. Chris started the presentation, his voice steady, his father among the audience lending an added weight to his words. As he handed off parts of the presentation to his teammates, he felt a swell of pride in their achievements. The presentation was a success. The board impressed with the innovation and thoroughness of the project. Chris's role as an undercover heir was briefly mentioned, but it was the team's accomplishment that took center stage. After the applause had faded, Natalie approached Chris. "I never doubted your technical skills, Chris, but today I saw a leader. I'm sorry I held back these past weeks. I think I understand better now what you were trying to achieve." Chris smiled, relief and satisfaction mingling in his expression. "Thanks, Natalie. I've learned a lot from all of you about trust, leadership and friendship. I hope we can keep moving forward together." As the team celebrated their successful presentation, Chris felt a blend of elation and nostalgia. The project that had brought them all together was nearing its end, and with it, the intense shared experiences that had forged unexpected bonds. The office was filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses, a festive atmosphere marking the culmination of their hard work. However, amidst the celebration, Chris received a cryptic text message from his father. "Jonathan, meet me in my office tomorrow morning. We need to discuss your future at Hamilton Technologies." The message sent a ripple of anxiety through him. His father's tone was unreadable, and the vague nature of the text left Chris with a sense of foreboding. The next morning, Chris approached his father's office with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. The last few months had been a transformative journey, not just for his professional growth, but also in his personal perceptions of leadership and responsibility. He wondered what his father had observed and how it would affect his role within the company. Jonathan Hamilton sat behind his desk, his expression serious as he motioned for Chris to take a seat. "Chris, I've been following your progress closely," he began, his voice measured. "What you've achieved with the team is impressive. You've shown leadership, humility, and a capacity to inspire. However, it's time we discuss the implications of your undercover project and what it means for your future here." Chris listened intently, trying to gauge where the conversation was headed. "I understand, Dad. I've learned a lot, and I'm ready to take on whatever responsibilities you think I'm suited for." Jonathan nodded, then paused, choosing his next words carefully. "It's not just about taking on a role, Chris. It's about where you see yourself within the company and how you plan to integrate these lessons into our corporate culture. We need to strategize not just for your future, but for the future of Hamilton Technologies." The discussion that followed was a deep dive into potential paths forward, including Chris taking on a more significant leadership role, possibly leading a new division or spearheading innovative projects that aligned with his newly discovered passions and insights. As they concluded, Jonathan added one more piece of information, his tone now slightly more ominous. There's also the matter of the board. Not everyone is pleased with how the undercover project was handled. Some see it as a liability, questioning the ethics and potential fallout. We need to prepare for some challenging conversations. Chris nodded, his mind already turning over the implications. He left his father's office with a new set of challenges looming on the horizon. The celebration from the day before seemed a world away, replaced by the sobering realities of corporate politics and future responsibilities. The episode ends as Chris walks away from the office, reflecting on his journey and the upcoming challenges. His thoughts are interrupted by a call from Natalie, hinting at a new development in the project that could change everything once again. "Chris, you need to see this. Something's come up that might shift our whole approach." Viewers are left in suspense, wondering what this new development could be and how it will impact Chris, his relationship with Natalie, and the future of Hamilton Technologies. The morning after the presentation and his unsettling conversation with his father, Chris arrived at the office early, his mind preoccupied with the various outcomes of the upcoming board meeting. The weight of potential scrutiny from the board members about his undercover project felt heavy on his shoulders. As he walked through the quiet office, the remnants of the previous night's celebration, a few stray decorations and empty glasses, reminded him of the team's recent success. Yet the joy seemed distant now, overshadowed by the anticipation of the challenges ahead. Chris opened his laptop to review the project details once more, looking for any areas that might be targeted by the board as problematic. His review was meticulous, reflecting his determination to defend the project and his approach to it. While absorbed in his work, Chris received an unexpected message from Natalie. "Can we meet for coffee before everyone gets in? There's something important I need to discuss with you." Her message was urgent, yet vague, adding another layer of anxiety to his already tense morning. Meeting Natalie at the small coffee shop adjacent to their office, Chris greeted her, trying to read her expression. "What's going on, Natalie? You seem concerned." Natalie took a deep breath before speaking. "Last night, after you left, I did some digging into the project analytics. I found some discrepancies that could suggest we're not as secure as we thought. It's something that could affect not just our project, but the entire company." The gravity of her words hit Chris hard. This was the last thing they needed, especially with the board already questioning the ethics of his undercover work. "Show me what you found. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with here." Together, they walked back to the office to prepare for what could be another major crisis, one that would test their resolve and their capability to manage not just technological challenges, but potentially severe reputational risks to Hamilton Technologies. Back in the office, Chris and Natalie pored over the project analytics, tracing the data streams and cross-referencing logs. The discrepancy Natalie had noticed seemed minor at first, but hinted at a deeper vulnerability in the system's architecture, possibly overlooked during the development phase. Chris felt a mix of frustration and admiration. Frustration at the timing of this discovery and admiration for Natalie's sharp eye and dedication. "You did well to catch this, Natalie. Let's figure out a fix before this goes any further." As they worked together to identify the root cause of the vulnerability, Chris felt the familiar surge of teamwork and problem-solving energy that had characterized much of their project time. It was a reminder of why he had embarked on this undercover journey in the first place, to connect with the heart of the company, the innovation and the people who drove it. Their collaboration led them to a temporary solution to patch the vulnerability, but both knew a more permanent fix would require broader changes and possibly a significant update to the system. "Once we present this to the board, they'll have to see the seriousness of our commitment to this project and the company," Chris said, bolstered by their progress, but aware of the hurdles still ahead. Natalie nodded in agreement, her earlier apprehension replaced by a determined resolve. "Let's document everything we've done here. The board needs to understand not just the problem, but how proactive we are in addressing it." As they prepared their documentation, Chris felt a renewed sense of purpose. The upcoming board meeting was not just an opportunity to defend his project and his undercover work. It was a chance to demonstrate his and his team's unwavering dedication to the integrity and success of Hamilton Technologies. On the day of the board meeting, Chris felt a mix of nerves and determination. He and Natalie arrived early to set up the presentation room, ensuring that every detail was in place to not only present the solution to the vulnerability they had discovered, but also to showcase their proactive approach and dedication to the project's and company's security. As the board members filed into the room, Chris exchanged reassuring glances with Natalie. They had prepared extensively, rehearsing their parts of the presentation to ensure clarity and impact. Chris began the meeting with a strong, clear voice, outlining the purpose of the presentation and immediately addressing the discovered vulnerability. "We've identified a critical security flaw that went unnoticed during the initial phases of the project. However, we've not only found a temporary solution, but are also in the process of implementing a more robust, long-term fix. Today, we want to walk you through our steps and our plan for moving forward, Chris stated confidently. Natalie took over to detail the technical aspects, explaining the nature of the vulnerability, the potential risks involved, and the steps they had taken to mitigate those risks. Her command of the technical details and the clear way she communicated complex information reinforced the seriousness and the professionalism of their team. The board listened intently, with some members nodding appreciatively while others seemed to scrutinize every word, their faces unreadable. Chris knew that the success of this presentation was crucial, not only for the project, but for his future role in the company. As the presentation moved into the Q&A session, the board members began to ask pointed questions about the vulnerability, the oversight, and what it meant for the company's overall cybersecurity strategy. Chris and Natalie handled the questions with a combination of technical accuracy and strategic foresight, often referring back to their prepared documentation and the proactive measures they were proposing. However, one board member, Mr. Harrow, seemed particularly skeptical. Mr. Hamilton, while I commend your team's effort in identifying and fixing this issue, I'm concerned about how this was allowed to happen in the first place. How can we assure our clients and stakeholders that such oversights won't occur in the future? Chris responded. That's a valid concern, Mr. Harrow. Part of our long-term strategy includes not only revising our development protocols, but also implementing a more rigorous, continuous testing process. We're committed to learning from this incident and strengthening our systems to prevent similar issues. The tension in the room was palpable as other board members weighed in with their concerns and suggestions. Chris addressed each comment with respect and firmness, demonstrating his understanding of the stakes involved and his commitment to transparency and improvement. As the meeting concluded, the board seemed cautiously optimistic about the measures Chris and his team proposed. They commended the team's quick response and thorough handling of the situation, but reminded Chris of the need for ongoing vigilance. Walking out of the boardroom, Chris felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The presentation had gone as well as he could have hoped, but the real work of implementing the changes and rebuilding trust would begin now. Natalie, walking beside him, gave him a small, supportive smile. You handled that incredibly well, Chris. Whatever happens next, I'm glad we're in this together. Chris returned the smile, feeling grateful for Natalie's support and the bond they had formed through their shared challenges. Thanks, Natalie. I couldn't have asked for a better partner in all this. In the days following the board meeting, the office atmosphere gradually began to shift. The initial shock and suspicion that had surrounded Chris's revelation of his true identity started to dissipate as the team witnessed his genuine commitment to the project and the company. His efforts, along with Natalie's support, began to foster a new sense of unity and purpose among the team members. Chris took it upon himself to schedule one-on-one meetings with each team member, offering them the opportunity to voice any lingering concerns and to discuss their visions for the future of the project. These conversations were sometimes difficult, but always constructive. Many expressed their initial feelings of betrayal, but also their admiration for how Chris had handled the recent challenges. During one such meeting with Dave, who had been one of his staunchest critics, a breakthrough occurred. Dave finally expressed his respect for Chris's technical skills and leadership during the crisis. I won't lie, Chris, it was a rough start, but you've earned my respect. Not many could have handled that boardroom the way you did. Chris was grateful for Dave's words, understanding that they marked a significant step towards rebuilding trust within the team. Thanks, Dave. I've always valued your straightforwardness and your commitment. Let's keep pushing forward together. With each conversation, Chris felt the weight of his disguise lifting, replaced by the authenticity of his interactions and the strengthening bonds with his colleagues. As the project neared completion and the implementation of the new security measures took effect, Chris reflected on the lessons he had learned throughout his journey. The experience had not only transformed his professional approach, but had also deeply affected his personal views on leadership and collaboration. In a team meeting, Chris decided to share these reflections openly. This project, and everything that came with it, taught me more than I could have anticipated about the value of transparency, trust, and teamwork. I stepped into this role undercover to understand our company from the ground up, but I ended up learning just as much about myself. The team listened, appreciative of his candor. Chris continued, "We've all faced challenges and made mistakes along the way, but the resilience and integrity you've all shown have been the real success story here. I'm proud of what we've achieved together and how we've grown." Natalie, who had been instrumental in navigating the project's final phases, added her perspective. "Chris brought us a challenge, but he also brought us an opportunity to prove how capable we are, even under unusual and difficult circumstances. We've all grown through this, and our project is stronger for it." The meeting ended on a high note, with the team feeling motivated and united. The project was not just a success in terms of its technical achievements, but had also become a catalyst for personal and professional growth. Chris's journey, fraught with deception and discovery, had ultimately led to a deeper understanding of the values that would define his leadership style going forward: honesty, integrity, and a genuine respect for the people who make a company what it is. As the project officially wrapped up, Chris initiated discussions about future endeavors and how the lessons learned could be integrated into the broader company culture. He proposed the establishment of an innovation task force, led by team members who had shown exceptional leadership and problem-solving skills during the project, including Natalie. And I believe this task force can drive new projects with the same spirit of transparency and collaboration that made our project a success, Chris explained during a planning session with senior management. His proposal was met with enthusiasm, especially as it aligned with the company's goals to foster innovation and adaptability. Natalie was excited about the opportunity. "This is exactly the kind of initiative we need to keep pushing ourselves and the company forward. I'm in," she affirmed, her commitment reflecting her readiness to take on new challenges. As plans for the task force took shape, Chris felt a profound sense of accomplishment and anticipation. He was not just moving past his undercover beginnings, but was also shaping the future path of Hamilton Technologies in a meaningful way. With the Innovation Task Force approved and beginning its work, Chris took a moment to reflect on his journey from undercover heir to transformative leader. He recognized that the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but he felt prepared to face them with the support of his team and the lessons he had learned. The final team meeting of the project was bittersweet. Chris thanked everyone for their hard work, dedication, and adaptability. "Each of you has contributed something unique to this project, and I hope you'll bring that same energy and creativity to whatever comes next," he said, his voice tinged with both pride and gratitude. As the team disbanded, Natalie stayed back to speak with Chris. "You know, I wasn't sure what to think when all this started, but I'm glad I got to be a part of it. Working with you, learning from you, it's changed how I see my career here." Chris smiled, appreciative of her words and the journey they had shared. "I feel the same, Natalie. I couldn't have asked for a better partner through all this, and I'm looking forward to seeing where we go from here." They agreed to meet later to discuss the first initiatives of the task force, their conversation full of ideas and possibilities. As they left the meeting room, they looked back at the empty space that had witnessed the highs and lows of their project, now ready to host new teams and new dreams. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing to our channel and supporting us through the thanks button.